Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. You know, it's often said that it's better to light a single candle than to curse the darkness, except if you're at the Department of Health and Human Services and the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, where if you light a single candle, it's a federal case. Joining us here to discuss what is an absolutely bizarre demand from CMS is Lori Windham, Vice President and Senior Counsel at Becket Law, which is representing St. Francis Hospital in Oklahoma. It's a Catholic hospital, who has been told that they will not receive reimbursements for any Medicare or Medicaid patients until they blow out the candle that's in the Catholic sanctuary right next to the tabernacle. Lori, seriously?
And I think that's what I said. And Becket, all we do is religious liberty work. I've been doing this for a long time, and this one surprised even me. I was, when I first heard about this case, I was like, really? This is what's happening? This is what they're going to make a federal case over? But it seems like it might be.
I'm Catholic, so I understand what the what the candle represents. It represents that the presence of Christ is in the tabernacle, and those candles are lit 364 days. There's either 24 or 48 hour period between, it's either Monday, Thursday, or the Good Friday service to the Easter Vigil, where the tabernacle is empty, and so the candle is blown out. Now, the Catholic Church has been around for 2,000 years or so. Catholic hospitals have been around for about 150 years in this country, and obviously before that. How many major fires have resulted from a sanctuary candle near a Catholic tabernacle? I'm just curious as to what the stats would be on this and why this is such a danger.
If it happened, I'm pretty sure it would be the first. What we said to HHS is this is not Mrs. O'Leary's barn. This is not some sort of major danger here. This is a candle that's been there for a very long time. It's always lit. It's inside, and for anybody who's not familiar with these candles, it's a small votive candle. It's about 8 inches tall, about 3 inches wide. It's inside a glass candle holder, inside another glass candle holder. It's got a brass topper on the top of it, and it's up about 6 feet high on the wall of this chapel. So, if you wanted to injure yourself with this thing, you'd have to really try.
Exactly. And look, I used to also be in the burg fire alarm business, right? And this is previous careers. And I dealt with fire marshals. And I always tell people, if you want to know what it's like to deal with the fire marshal, I'm going to tell you a joke. And I'm going to go ahead and drop this one on you, Lori. What's the difference between God and a fire marshal?
I don't know.
God doesn't think he's a fire marshal. And I'm telling you, that's a reflection of reality. And the fire marshal in this case doesn't care. And he shouldn't. It's a silly thing to care about. Catholic churches have these. Every single Catholic church has this. St. Francis, a Catholic hospital, has a chapel which operates as a Catholic church. This is a expression of it's a religious expression. It's a freedom of religion issue, as you say at Becket Law. But you really have to go out of your way to think that this is some sort of an issue. I read the letter, right, from CMS, and they're citing the NFPA. I've been around fire marshals and the NFPA an awful lot. Let me tell you something. I used to have to know that thing pretty well. I have never seen them turn down an occupancy permit for a Catholic church because they had an open flame next to the tabernacle.
You have to shut them all down, right?
Yeah. You have to yank the occupancy permit for all of that. And besides which, that's a local issue. It is really up to each county, the fire marshal in each county, to make those determinations. And if a fire marshal actually tried to do that, of course, Becket Law would haul them into court over the freedom of religion issue. Yeah, absolutely. But the proper authority for determining whether something like this is dangerous is the local fire marshal, and the local fire marshals already made the call on this. What prompted CMS to get involved in this in the first place?
It came up in a really odd way. There's a normal process that you have to go through as a hospital. You get your accreditation, shows that you're a good, high quality hospital. And that accreditation goes over to CMS. This is the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, for anyone who does not track all the federal agencies every day and night. And CMS says, okay, you're accredited, so therefore we've decided you can serve patients who are receiving Medicare and Medicaid and CHIP funding. And so what happened was the survey happens for the reaccreditation, very normal thing. And this time, for the first time ever, they get a citation saying, well, there's an unattended flame that is always lit here in the hospital. We can't have that. And so therefore, this needs to go out. This is a violation. And so St. Francis, argued exactly why that was there and the precautions they'd taken and the fact that this is a normal part of worship in Catholic Church and in the chapel. And the accreditor held firm. And so they appealed to CMS and said, hey, look, this is a problem. We have federal law protection, and this doesn't even violate any of the regulations out there. You can't even point to something that says no hospital chapel candles. And CMS said, no, we think it's a fair ruling, and so it stands. And so you're going to have to extinguish the flame.
Yeah, I mean, I've got the letter here on the response to the appeal from someone named Scott J. Cooper at CMS, saying that they agree with TJC's TJC is the Joint Commission deficiency citation because the hospital must ensure that the life safety from fire requirements are met in accordance with 42 CFR, blah, blah, blah. Answer number 14 addresses the use of lighted candles and states that such candles must be placed in a substantial candle holder and supervised at all times they are lighted. Again, if you've got a patient in a room who wants to light a candle, I might understand why you need that to be supervised. This is a stationary candle holder, which is covered. It's, as you say, it's basically double encased and covered. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to fall off the table. Nobody's going to bump their elbow into it and have it tumble into a bunch of sheets on the floor or something like that. I mean, this is just absurd. And again, one more time, fire safety issues are local issues. They're not federal issues. That's a state and county issue. Usually the state just authorizes the county to deal with it. That's the reason why you have fire marshals. 60 years in is a really weird time to bring this up. And the reason why I'm emphasizing all of these things, Lori, is I see this as sort of an escalation from CMS, that sort of a pattern of escalation regarding religious expression. And HHS has been part of this now for, whenever the Obamacare decision on requiring employers to supply birth control and the multiple lawsuits against the Little Sisters of the Poor, which is one of the most absurd examples of lawfare by a bureaucracy, I think, in our nation's history. This might actually top that. Do you see the same thing? I mean, you guys are at Becket Law, man. You're in the trenches with this stuff. You guys do great work. Are you seeing an escalation now from HHS overall and CMS here in this case against religious liberty and freedom of religious expression?
What I see is just one more time a refusal to take these religious concerns seriously. This has been raised with them. This has been explained to them. And yet they still are just going to hold firm to this rule that isn't really even a rule and not hear the religious concerns. And just as you said, we have a long history with HHS at Becket. We litigated the Hobby Lobby case all the way to the Supreme Court over the Obamacare mandate. We won that. We litigated the Little Sisters case all the way to the Supreme Court over the Obamacare mandate. We won that twice.
Right.
And yet we still have HHS refusing to understand that, yes, they're bound by the law, that we have a religious freedom protection that's part of our federal statutes. We have religious freedom protections that are part of our Constitution. And so when you get these concerns, you can't just wave them off. You're not supposed to just say, oh, no, 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 we're just following the rules here. You've got to actually take this seriously and look at, well, is there a good reason for doing this? You know, the legal term is compelling interest. Do I have a compelling interest here? No, there's not a compelling interest in snuffing out this double encased and covered sanctuary candle. And yet, you know, it's difficult to get HHS to really look at these religious liberty concerns seriously.
Yeah, you know, and I put this up in our headlines, and I'll write more extensively on this when we post this podcast, obviously. But the first comments I got back was, "Oh my gosh, it's such a fire risk." I mean, the person was being serious. You know, there's oxygen in hospitals, and you know, you could say that the kitchen is a fire risk, but they have suppressors in the kitchen. They got suppressors everywhere in a hospital. You can't go 6 feet without a smoke detector, without a water flow device. Without heat detectors. There's in some areas there's like this commenter said, you've got, you know, like a halon system, or, you know, a neutral gas system to put out things like grease fires. Hospitals are required to have massive amounts of fire suppression for that very reason. And a single candle, again, is not going to defeat. I would guess, just off the top of my head, and this is from 20 years ago when I was in the business, I would guess that you've got at least $50,000 to $100,000 worth of fire suppression equipment in a hospital that size. They've spent the money on this. They know what the issue is. The fire marshal, again, has approved it in relation to the fire suppression system that they've got in these hospitals. There is no compelling interest. I mean, this really shouldn't even survive. What's below intermediate scrutiny? I know there's intermediate scrutiny.
Rational basis. Do you have a rational basis for what you did?
Rational basis. That's what I was reaching for. This doesn't even survive a rational basis. There's no rational threat from a single candle in a sanctuary, encased as it is in every single Catholic church.
That's exactly right. And just as you said, St. Francis takes fire safety really seriously. There are sprinklers overhead inside this chapel. If something, you know, were to ever happen, there's sprinklers there. They even said, you know what, we'll put in some extra things. We're willing to put in tile behind the candle or underneath the candle if you're worried about something like that. And this is in a separate room. It's not out there in a hallway next to a big oxygen container or anything like that. It's not in a location, it's way up high on a wall. It's not in a location where it's going to be close to any kind of equipment. And so I don't understand why the federal agency here is failing so far to see reason. This should be a really easy one.
And, you know, there are people who are going to say, well, why don't they just use an electric candle? And the answer to that is because that's not what Catholic Church doctrine requires. It requires an actual votive candle. I mean, that's part of their religious expression. And St. Francis is a Catholic institution. They have a Catholic chapel with a tabernacle, which you know, you can't just jam that someplace and throw a flashlight on it. That's not how it's done in the Catholic Church. We Catholics take this very seriously as part of our religious expression. And I can tell you, I take that very, very seriously. And there's no, even if you can argue, well, maybe the Catholic Church is wrong about this, it's still their decision. This is a Catholic Church decision. It's a decision that Catholics make.
Yeah, I think if there's anything the last 10 years have taught us, it's that Health and Human Services really should not be in charge of religious doctrine. They do not need to be the ones deciding what is okay and what is not okay for Catholic Mass and the adoration of the Blessed Sacrament.
That's really well put. And I'm laughing because this is so ridiculous. It's so ridiculously petty. They're going to, I mean, people really should understand, they should comprehend what the ramifications of this are. We're kind of approaching this as, and I think for good reason, as a ridiculous piece of, you know, bureaucratic nonsense. But it's a very costly piece of bureaucratic nonsense, because if this decision holds and St. Francis doesn't remove this sanctuary candle, which would require them to remove the tabernacle as well and not be able to hold mass in a Catholic church, then what happens is all the patients who are being treated who have Medicaid or Medicare coverage, their bills will not be paid. They will, and so the hospital will not be able to provide care to the elderly, to the poor, to the infirm, the very patients who need a Catholic hospital most will have to be turned away.
Yeah, and this is what they're here for. They're here to love God and love their fellow man. And so to be able to serve their community, they serve 400,000 patients a year. They have provided hundreds of millions of dollars in free care to their community over the years. They want to continue doing that. And so, it's easy to laugh at silly bureaucrats because it is pretty ridiculous. But, the penalty here is really draconian. Why would you think that is the right response to something like this? Why can't we just work this out? And unfortunately, HHS's version of working this out seems to be, well, just give up your religious exercise and it's all going to be fine.
Right. Yes. And I think that we're seeing that as a pattern from HHS. We saw it with the Little Sisters of the Poor, and now we're seeing it here with St. Francis Hospital in Oklahoma. What's next? I mean, obviously, you guys have taken this up. You're going to escalate this. What does escalating this mean? And what are the next steps? And what do you expect to see from that?
Well, we've sent this letter. We made it public, but before we made it public, we sent it off to the heads of HHS and CMS. As well as Oklahoma's senators, to notify them about what is going on, what's an egregious violation of religious freedom in their state, and we're waiting to see what's going to happen. We encourage people to check it, follow us on Twitter at Becket Law, or check our website at becketlaw.org, and we'll be posting updates to this case as we get it. But we're waiting to hear back. Is HHS going to respond to this? Are they going to do the right thing? Are they going to see the light? Or are they going to dig their heels in? If we don't hear something from them very soon, we are going to take this to court. We're quite confident that if we go to court, we'll win. We said that to them in the letter. We've got a long track record with HHS to back that up. And so, we sent the letter first because this is a case that really ought to be solvable. They've already recognized in the past that there was no problem here with this candle. No reason they can't do that again. So we sent the letter first because we want to give them a chance to just solve this the easy way. And if they don't want to do this the easy way, then we'll have to do it in federal court. And so we'll be filing a lawsuit very soon.
Yeah, I don't think that they really want to go up against the Fifth Circuit again, do they? So Oklahoma's the Fifth Circuit, right?
It's actually the 10th Circuit, the same one that ruled in favor of Hobby Lobby.
There you go, 10th Circuit, even better. The Fifth Circuit has been pretty tough on the federal government, but yes, Oklahoma being the 10th Circuit, yes, I think that the 10th Circuit might be a little tired of playing some of these games with HHS. And of course, if it gets to the Supreme Court, I suspect that they'll be even less happy to be dealing with an issue like this, especially because of its absurd nature. I mean, really, this is an absurd issue on which to predicate the funding necessary to provide medical care for all sorts of people who can't afford it otherwise. It really is, I think it really speaks to not just an animus against religious expression, which I think it does do that, but also I think it really speaks to the nature of authority and power, which is that as power accumulates into fewer and fewer hands, its exercise becomes more and more arbitrary, almost as a way of demonstrating that the power exists. And I really get a strong sense that having looked at this and responded in the way they did, they're not really interested in correcting an error. They just really want to tell St. Francis and the Catholics that run this that they're in charge, that that HHS is in charge, rather than people who are trying to deliver the health care and help their communities.
Ed, I think it's really well said. And I think something we see again and again with our clients at Becket, we do religious freedom cases. That's all we do. And I think so many times when our clients stand up and say, we are going to defend our rights, we are going to follow our faith, we have courage, we're going to continue to do this. What we say is courage is contagious. When our clients stand up to this and say, no, we are going to continue to live out our faith, the other side is taken aback. What's going on? What's happening here? I feel like there's often this expectation that if you just explain these things to the religious people, they're going to change their minds and they're going to go along. And that's a huge misunderstanding of history, to think if you just explain it, that people are going to fold. And I think it's a misunderstanding of what it means to be a person of faith, and what it means to be a community of faith, and how that impacts and changes your life and what you do. And so, it's unfortunate that you have to have a situation like this or a case like this, but it's also encouraging to see St. Francis standing up and saying, no, we're living out our faith. We're living it out through worship in our chapel. We're living it out through serving our community. And yes, we can do both.
Absolutely. Well, Lori Windham, thank you so much for coming on here and talking to us about this. I'm hoping that we'll get you back on as this case progresses. I'm actually crossing my fingers that common sense is going to prevail. And the next time we talk to you, it's going to be to explain how somebody's apologizing to St. Francis Hospital and making sure that this type of thing doesn't happen again. Somehow, I don't think that that's going to be the immediate outcome, but I certainly hope that we can come back and talk to you more about this and any other cases that Becket Law is handling.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. We hope we'll be back to report on a victory soon.
All right, Lori Windham, becketlaw.org and at Becket Law on Twitter. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Ed.